Hey folks, sorry, I've been sick for the last few days, but I I guess I'll start off by checking in, saying that I'm on day 35 of this streak. It's like the longest streak I've been on with no FAP recently. Um, Classes have started up. Didn't really do much over the winter break. Didn't go back down to see my remaining family members. I just didn't really feel like traveling, particularly since I had a grading issue with the professor, and he wanted to kind of muck around and all that. And I got a B minus in that class, which I guess linear algebra, and I guess if I get, I have to get an A essentially. If the university I'm applying to will average that with the other one, or if not, then it'll be a B. So I'm gonna aim for an A in this new class I'm taking, which is differential equations, which follows up that. It's the final math class, and it's the one I've been kind of like building up to all this time. But anywho, so yeah, I take a differential equations online. Just working on homework now. I'm trying to get myself warmed up and up to speed because classes have started, and I'm taking 19 units, so it's gonna be a pretty intense this semester. Also taking electricity and magnetism, so that's like the second and final of the physics courses. I got a B plus in the last one, so I cleared out that requirement definitely for sure. Like I said, the math thing may depend on whether or not they average the courses together, or they're willing to just take the differential equations grade and just cross out their requirement. But then 3 programming or software engineering courses. One is applied Python programming, another is programming methods with C++, and then the third one, which is kind of like the one that I've been really looking forward to getting into, is data structures and algorithms with Java. And there's equivalent courses for that sort of stuff with other programming languages, but I know that either way, however you get into that, that's kind of, from what I can tell, the dividing line between whether or not you can get into some software related position or not. It's like your skills in that, and plus, I know there's other factors, things like resume formatting and interviewing skills and timing the market, and what specific skill set you have, and what all this other stuff. But as far as that specific thing is concerned, that's sort of the dividing line. So I was really wanting to get into that because to complete this course, which is obviously the plan, I can get the first of these certificates of specialization. This one will be in Java programming, and that'll be at the end of this semester. And I will need to ramp up applying for jobs at different areas, just because I'm trying to really run low on the unemployment, and I gotta get my credit cards reset, and get the finances taken care of, that sort of thing. But also in addition to that, because I've been in the midst of basically dealing with a bunch of bull hockey from 2 of my cousins from my mom's side, due to the recent and even though she was 93, it was still pretty tragic because I just never got to really say goodbye to her, and I kind of felt like if I could have been there that Thanksgiving, that she'd still be alive and things would be a lot different and all that. But due to the passing of my grandmother, and the way state law works over there, and a number of other factors, basically the older of those 2 cousins is currently the court-appointed personal representative for the estate. And even though the will is there, my grandma, she was a very shrewd and fair and balanced and intelligent person. She made sure she had a will, and she had written out in a certain language, and she knew how to make sure that there wouldn't be any way for anyone to sort of write somebody else out of the will, or take everything and run with it. But even then, they've been engaging in bullying tactics about, my grandparents' house, and that's something that my sister and I want to keep. Whereas the other two, they want to sell it, and we're, making progress towards getting a probate litigation lawyer to really go after them and put the screws to them, so they'll, knock that off, and we can keep the house and secure a number of other things like some, sentimental effects, that sort of deal. Which, in some ways, to give them some credit, there were some of those which they, other side was amenable on, and they were, decent about it. That's just because they just didn't have any interest in it or see any monetary value there, I think, for the most part. But, and so I'll have to get a job ASAP, one that's not gonna, get in the way of, my coursework and that sort of deal, but, at the same time will pay enough, because, given that, things like life insurance and retirement accounts probably aren't going to cover everything, I will probably have to take out some sort of small mortgage to buy out their shares, and that's going to fall on me to take care of that. And, I'm not just doing this for myself, I'm doing this for my grandma and my grandpa. Because, one thing that those other two don't understand is, like, that house, that was kind of like their life work, They, and it probably seems strange to a lot of younger folks. I mean, I'm kind of in that sort of weird sort of in between generation right now. It's kind of fun using that sort of expression, because my grandma would use that to refer to my parents' generation, but maybe it's more of a, you reach a certain age, now you're in between, because you're approaching middle age. Maybe that's what it meant. But where, like, I knew people who, knew what the world was like, not just, in terms of, like, the historical events and the stuff you hear on, like, the these documentaries, but, like, what it was really like to be, like, living in that world as it was, with whether it's the technology or it was the music, the culture, the political leaders. When someone like FDR or Winston Churchill or Joseph Stalin or the various fascist dictators and all that, when they weren't just they weren't just caricatures or historical figures, they were actual flesh and blood people. Like, I knew people who were alive during that time and who had their lives, in many cases upended because of those individuals, or because of events that, they brought about. And, folks who had to, like, take up arms, or felt that they had to take up arms to go and, fight in, quote unquote, the war, which, when you say the war, you're talking about something that's generational, and that was World War II. And, my grandparents, they grew up in poverty pretty much. They were pretty much poor. It's not like they didn't have a roof over their head or food to eat, but, they were, while they were better off than some people, they weren't, they definitely didn't, have a luxurious, upbringing because of the Depression. And, also because, my grandpa's case, like, even though he was the oldest, son in his generation, he was basically born like a generation, too late, in the sense that if he had been born one generation earlier in that same sort of role, he probably would have been a multi-millionaire. And so he was born, talk about being born on a bad sign or a bad time, because his grandpa was like a multi-millionaire, wealthy farmer. And the homestead is still there. It's passed into a different branch of the family, I guess through a daughter or something like that. But with my grandma, it's also a similar sort of thing where, her dad had been sort of a non-degreed, literally pulled himself up by his bootstraps, learned on the job, became an equipment engineer kind of a guy. And then he got laid off right at the start of the Depression, and, had to go to digging ditches to try to get enough money to, get by. And his parents would have to apparently come by, like every weekend or so to make sure that everybody in the house had you know, food to eat and that sort of thing. And they'd bring that by from the countryside where they had, you know, my grandma said they had a family farm as well. And that's pretty much what, you know, all those Central European, you know, immigrant families, they would set up when they came over to the Midwest. They get, once they had enough, you know, money saved up, you know, they probably worked as a farmhand or so for several years, saved up enough money, and then gotten themselves some land so they'd have, you know, a farm. And you know, they apparently still had that at that point in time in her branch of the family, so they had the means to bring food into town. And you know, it was a very tough time for them. And so once, you know, they got through the Depression and World War II, they met up and they, you know, fell in love and got married. I mean, it was a matter of like, you know, we have is this big goal in our life to own our own home, to be able to, you know, plant our banner on a certain location and say, you know, this is where we set up our roots. And I don't want that to disappear into thin air. And you know, I know my sister has the same mentality, and it's something that I used to appreciate that, you know, she shares with me in that regards. You know, because the other two just, they look at it as going like, oh wait, how much money can we get for this? And partially that's because, well, to be honest with you, the younger of the two, she is known to have been, and I don't know if she still does it. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure she does. When I say I don't know, I'm not saying that she doesn't. I'm just saying, like, you know, I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but knowing how people are, they'll say, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm free and clear. I got, you know, I got over that. I went to rehab and I don't do that anymore." And then of course you find out that no, they're, you know, they relapsed, you know, 2 days before they told you that they didn't do that. So I'm pretty sure she's still a heroin junkie, and so it's, you know, very much ooh, I can get that much money and then I can use it to buy a bunch of drugs, you know. And that's not what that house is for. It's not so somebody can get, you know, a bunch of drug money so they get effed up, you know. That was my grandparents', you know, life work, and I want to keep that. And you know, assuming I am able to, you know, get married and have kids, like I would want my kids to be able to run around and play, and you know, where, you know, their grandmother grew up and where their great grandparents, you know, set up their roots. And you know, there's like a story to almost every, like, you know, plank of wood in there, and tile and all this kind of stuff, where like, you know, like, and I think maybe there's some that I wanted to get into either in this video or maybe more detail in another video. But you know, like, these stories my grandma would tell me, because one thing that I did, you know, even though admittedly I did spend a lot of time talking about a lot of just the bad things that had happened, mistakes that I made, you know, including my own mistakes, over the last, you know, 20 or so years. One thing I did try to make a point to do was to, you know, ask her about like her life experiences and her memories and things of that nature. And you know, she told me some things about how, you know, here's what the house was like when we first moved in. It was actually half its size. I think it was still 2 stories, but it was half the size. They didn't have a garage. It was just like an empty lot there. And they didn't have like the you know, a bunch of the rooms that are there they didn't have. And I'm pausing right now because I just already know that those 2 cousins claimed they wanted to rip up the rugs and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and we haven't given our say to do that. I'm really hoping they haven't, because again, you know, there's all these, there's it's not just a rug, you know what I'm saying? It's like my grandpa and grandma went and, you know, they poured their lifeblood into that house, you know. And tearing that up, they might as well be tearing up, you know, my grandparents' graves, you know. And these 2 cousins, they're not biologically my cousins. Their father, who, you know, I have good memories of him. I don't look upon him as a bad guy. He definitely did some really dumb things when he was younger, but then who the hell hasn't? But, I would refer to him as my uncle, but he was adopted. And, um, his ex-wife stayed with him for 10 years and then divorced him because, 10 years. I mean, it was all planned out, it seems like, with her, because 10 years, according to the state law over there, is the, you have to, if you're married for 10 years, then you get maximum divorce payout, basically. So she made sure, okay, I'll stick around for 10 years and then I'll divorce him. It was like, strategically planned out. This is how I'm going to, like, wreck his life. And, the stress from all that, the being hounded by her, his life being threatened from what I could tell. It led him to dying at 47. And basically she raised those kids, and she, was going around with one guy after the next, and then apparently, like, got with this latest guy, and I guess they changed her name to some hyphenated form. But anyways, they don't act like people who have, like, that emotional connection of, like, this is our family's home and this is where our grandparents lived, and they're just wanting to just get it out on the market. And just the way they talk about it, it's like, this is not just some house. This is, which is what it is to them. It's just something they can just show to people, and, oh, how much money are you going to give us? How much money are you going to give us? And, so yeah, so I kind of paused and digressed there a bit, because I started thinking about that stuff, and I think about the conversations I had with my grandma, where she talked to me about how, well, your grandpa and I, we had a disagreement about where we wanted to put the stairway, and, he wanted it here and I wanted it there, but then, eventually, like, we went with his way, and so that's why the stairway's this way, and, oh, this room wasn't here, but, we picked out this carpet for when we got that, and that the house was, like, I think, I mean, like I said, half its size, no garage. It was like $10,000 at that point, which sounds like nothing, but, for the 1950s, just after inflation, we're talking like 110,000. And for, someone like, my grandpa, who, for a number of reasons, never went to college, him and his wife, my grandma, to have, worked together as a team to have budgeted this, that, and the other, to make sure they had the cash to, put down the down payment and get the mortgage paid off. And then when they were able to then take out another loan to basically double the square footage so they could actually have a family home. I mean, that was almost like putting, a total of close to $250,000, into that house. And that was a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice. And there's a history to it. There's a history to it that, it might not be, oh, President so and so's family, first lived here for the first, 10 years of, his life, or, his wife's family, they settled this land, and this is the house they lived in, or, the vice president or the secretary of state, she grew up here, or, it might not be like that, but it's like family history to me, and it's like stuff that, it's the kind of stuff that you can't just, like, replace. And there's things that I think back on now that really irk me about how everything went down when I was over there, but, I've been having all this stuff on my mind, and, these stories that I hope that I don't forget before I can put them to video at least and relate to them, because one thing that I gathered from my grandma, and she said this, and it really, like, I felt a lot of pain hearing this from her, feeling that she'd been forgotten, and that her generation had been forgotten. And I wanted to try to make it clear to her that she hadn't been forgotten, and her generation hadn't been forgotten. Neither of their sacrifices had been forgotten. And I think it's probably one of the most trying sorts of things about, like, losing a grandparent. You're losing somebody who was there to see so many things, and even just to know people. Like, I could, it's like, and luckily, luckily she wrote down a lot of stuff, which I'm really grateful that she did that, because she was a writer, and she was one of those, like, the first woman to go to college, and she wasn't, like, braggadocious about it. Still a married woman, still did all those things that they say, oh, if you want to get educated and have a career, you can't do all this, or if you do, you gotta make this, that, and the other. And she totally, like, just threw that out the window. It's like, no, I'm gonna do things as I see fit. I'm not letting somebody tell me I can't. Find that middle ground between the two. But for her, like, I could ask her, what was my Norwegian, great grandma like, the one who immigrated, in the 1850s, and she knew, her. She knew people who had fought in the Civil War. She knew people who had fought in the Spanish-American War and World War I, and one other thing, she knew one of Howard Hughes's nieces, I believe was the case. Yeah, one of Howard Hughes's nieces who actually stayed in that house. Yeah, and it's like, her and my grandpa, like, and you would think, oh, they might not have been. No, they were amazing people as far as I'm concerned. And childhood memory, she told me about how, like, oh, how she went from being, like, the baby of the family to being the middle child, and how that goes, emotionally painful for her, because she, just wanted to sort of, play around with her brother, and, her brother was like, oh, you're not the baby of the family anymore, that time's over, you're not the cutesy one anymore, that sort of thing. Or or like her relationship with her dad, my great grandpa, and with my great grandma, and things that, like she would say, and these are the things that you remember, like how when she graduated from college in 1948, and her parents drove out there to pick her up, and there was no congratulations, there was no, hugs, no, handshake, no nothing. It was just, you get in the car and you drive back, and no comment, no, not nothing. Because they had thought she was just gonna get a job back in town, and then, her money would be their money, and that kind of stuff. And, talking about how she met my grandpa, and, she didn't really know much about his service in the Navy, but then, things I found out about him, because I applied for his military awards, and they finally got back to me with them, and they're sending them. I need to contact the NPRC on on Monday, so that I can make sure they forward them to my address, not to that house, because I don't want those other cousins to get their hands on them. But there were stories about that, because I got my grandpa's military records, and I sent a copy to her, and then all the conversations that we had, coming forth from that, things she knew, things she didn't know, stuff about his family, what their dynamics were like, what their personalities were like, these people who, I might be able to find photos of them if they're still floating around. But they're kind of like ghosts, you know, and I only know about them because I, you know, was able to talk to her. And when you lose these people to the inevitability of, you know, death, which I'm still kind of struggling with, because not just because my mom passed away, which is something that, you know, you expect to happen when you're in your 50s or your 60s, you know, and when you're getting on in age, and it's kind of like, okay, it still hurts, but hey, they lived till their 80s or their 90s, and okay, they got to have a long life and all that, you know, and you lose these people to the inevitability of death. It's not just that they're not there anymore, or that you're alone, or that you're lonely. It's that, like, you lose all those stories, you lose all those memories. You know, like, I often wonder, like, what it was like with my grandpa, you know, because, you know, he would be like, I'm sure he was probably out on the family farm at some point, in the sounds of things, because I don't know exactly when they moved from the country into the city. I could probably find that in census records, but, yeah, I just remember what it would be, what it was like, you know, on some just random day where they got done with their work in the early morning and they were just sitting down, you know, just catching their breath, you know, having something to drink or, you know, a snack to eat, and they're just sitting there, you know, in some quiet field, middle of the day, and they're just chit-chatting about, you know, whatever, you know, some event coming up, or some girl they got, you know, he's got a crush on, or, you know, hey, I saw you with so and so. Hey, are you going out with her? You know, kind of a deal. Just, you know, regular guy talk. You know, talking about the weather, or, you know, it might have been in the midst of World War II, or it might have been, you know, then during the lead up, and they're talking about the news or so, and they're saying, oh, the president this, and then of course, you know, we hear the president and we think, you know, the current president, but, you know, for them, that would be someone we consider an historical figure, you know, FDR, you know, or who's the vice president, you know, Truman, you know, and it's like, I kind of wish I could have gotten some of those memories as well, or style of memories, because I think I can get some of those in terms of, like, my grandma's side of things, and I'll cherish those, and I do cherish the fact that she was willing to tell me about things like, you know, like that, or the time, it was sometime during the Depression, and some guy who was like he wasn't, I mean, he was, I guess, homeless, but, like, they didn't really refer to it like that. It was like, you know, he was out on the road looking for work, and he literally was looking for work. He wasn't just using it as a cover. That's just how, you know, folks were back then, I guess. You know, it was that you worked or you starved kind of a deal. And this guy had stopped by, just asked for like a sandwich, you know, because he was looking for work. And, you know, my great grandma, you know, just told him, you know, hang by here, I'll get you something. And she made him a sandwich and gave him something to drink. And, you know, then he finished and he thanked her. And I don't know if he had any change on him, or he just, like, you know, thanked them and then left. But you know, you think about that sort of stuff and you wonder, like, okay, where did that guy end up? I mean, obviously he's probably not alive anymore, but did he find work? Did he end up in the military during the war? Did he survive the war? If he came back, was he okay enough to, you know, function, you know, and have a life after the war? Was he able to, you know, do the whole getting married and having kids thing? Was he already married with kids and he was on the road looking for work so he could make enough money to send back home? You know, you wonder about those things. But hopefully I can remember enough stuff. That's the kind of stuff that's going through my mind right now while I'm trying to, you know, get enough stuff done tonight so that tomorrow isn't as stressful and I can get through all those assignments. You know, and the list goes on. Because, you know, these courses right now are very critical, but I'm still in a state of mind where I don't know. um, I'm trying to find a way forward, trying to have a positive mindset enough that I can get through things, but it's really hard because it feels like it feels like you have. And I'm also having to deal with the long-term effects of trauma that I haven't really talked about. Stuff that maybe one day I can, but it's sort of like one thing at a time, while trying to block off those traumas from being brought back, so I can actually heal. But um, I'm dealing with this sort of sense that these people were my tribe, and it's shrinking rapidly, and it's almost like the people who were around, who have experienced the things that you experienced, who would understand you, are increasingly just gone, and you're becoming like a fossil, and it's a strange thing to think about that and feel about that way, at 37. But that in many ways is like my state of mind, because and maybe it's a millennial thing, because I I was alive when so many things were rapidly changing, and it's kind of hard to explain to folks from after that time, what the world was like before something like 9/11, or um all the rapid political and cultural changes, and the economic catastrophes, and the breakdown of things that used to be certainties, like the family, or I mean, all sorts of stuff. Like it's just like, okay, like how do you get people to who came after that, who don't have a frame of reference to understand that the way things are right now is not the way things always were or always had to be. Um, and that's pretty difficult. Yeah, it honestly does feel like talking about some bygone era. It's almost like talking about like World War II, or even the 50s, like or the Great Depression. But yeah, I'm just really missing my grandma, and it's like these emotions, like I obviously experienced them when my mom passed away, but it was different. Um, with my grandma, I didn't really ever feel any sort of resentment or anger or hatred going one way or another. It was just like love, you know. And it was the same way with my grandpa. And it's like all these years later now, I'm like almost like reliving it, and because I remember what it was like when I was like, the vague memories I have of when I was like 5, almost 6 years old, and my grandpa passed away, and I relived it a little bit when um, when I got his military records, and I started talking to my grandma, and then she explained certain things to me about what his life was actually like, and how hard it was, and how people treated him, and you know disrespected him, and took advantage of him, and all that kind of stuff. Um, Pardon me. And I remember, like, after hearing that, I wasn't on the phone with her anymore. I just kind of was sitting there in my chair, and I just started crying. Because, he was my grandfather, and he was part of me, and I saw so much of myself in him, and, his life story. And I remembered all things ended for him. And now I'm kind of like reliving all that sort of stuff right now. You know, I even have this sort of like persistent image in my mind's eye of my grandma sitting there in her rocking chair in the family room in their house, and those two cousins bursting into the house and just grabbing things, and you know, one of them standing in her way telling her, you can't do anything, we're taking what we want, you know, where's the money, and all that kind of stuff. And it just, you know, it hurts me. And just, you know, even if they weren't like that, there's still that pain of just like I knew this was going to happen once upon a time, you know, but it still hurts. And there's also the fact that like I didn't get to spend as much time with her as I wanted to, largely because of other family members and other things that they did or decisions that they made. And you know, the passage of time that brought with it, to the extent that by the time I was able to actually get out to there, it was like what, like a little over like a year and a half before she died, and I was only able to be out there for a week. And then the second time I wanted to go out there, I couldn't because my mom was dying. And it's just been a really tough year. And it was a tough year, rather. And it's a really tough time right now, just trying to process all this and keep myself believing that I got something to go forward towards and got something to strive towards when, you know, everything, and not necessarily everyone, but everything is sort of telling me that there's nothing to you know, look forward to or work forward to. When it seems like, you know, all these avenues of like a normal, healthy, functional, fulfilled life, where I at least, you know, the very basic, leave my genetic signature behind, you know, where that's even been sort of like taken away or been cut off, you know, from me, or, you know, I've been cut off from, you know, it's like been blocked off from me, like, you know, a boulder blocking my way that I can't move out of the way, sort of a deal. I'm trying to find ways to climb over the boulder, you know, climb over this obstacle, sort of a deal. That's what I'm dealing with right now. And it's about 10:30 right now, so I'm gonna try and head back in, and maybe I can get the last few problems of this assignment I'm working on done, so I can at least have that, you know, crossed off, and I'll be able to say I got something done today, significant. So anyways, thanks for watching, and thanks for the support. I know, you know, this isn't really that much of a channel, it's more just a soapbox and a safe space and all those kinds of things for me. You know, a place where I can just get things off my chest and maybe get some support. But anyways, thanks for watching, folks, and I'm gonna stop rambling now, so bye bye.